Welcome back. If you are just joining us, you are on to your favorite program, Democracy and the Rule of Law. With me on the show this evening is Barrister Obiorame, a respected legal practitioner who practices here in Lagos. Barrister Obiorame, welcome you to the show this evening.
Thank you very much, and good evening to our viewers.
And also with me we have Barrister Deji Olalere, a very senior member of the bar, a senior legal practitioner who practices here in Lagos. To Barrister Deji, welcome you to the show this evening.
It's nice to be here. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, so, Barrister Deji, let's get your opinion on the ongoing protest. Of course, we had an opportunity to look at the protest last week. It is a 10 days protest, which have been tagged end bad governance protest. The people, of course, seek to air their view on the way the government have handled some of its policies and the administration so far. Of course, a lot of things has happened in between the protests. So we want to get your view, your assessment, government response. Of course, the president, even though people have said it was belated, had to give his speech, to calm the fray nerves and reassure Nigerians that they are on top of the situation. So we want to get your view on that protest.
Well, thank you very much, David. Well, I want to say that we have also been part of the protest. We have seen what has happened so far. And some of the demands placed before the government, we are expecting that the government to be up and doing, and that the government will take action on most of the demands that have been placed before it. We don't want a reoccurrence of this kind of situation, either in the immediate or in the future, as it were. And having said that, I want to say that there are lessons that have been learned or that ought to be learned from these protests. And the question is whether or not the government and all the stakeholders have learned anything from the protests. Particularly, a lot of issues arose in the course of this protest, which are legal questions that we expect that should be addressed subsequently. First of all, the question of whether the police has a right or the law enforcement agent has a right to open fire on protesters, whether or not the protest is violent. I think that's one issue that we all need to, as a nation, we all need, because of the professional way that some of the police and the law enforcement agent, handled this particular protest. And a lot of those protesters are still disgruntled, even though it may look as if there is some calmness. But a lot of the protesters, just because they feel that they should allow time for the government to show their sincerity in handling some of these demands. That's why it appears as if the situation has been calmed down a little bit. But it's not that in the heart of Nigerians, it has addressed the problems that have been raised, the question of hunger, the question of unemployment, the economic situation of the country, and all of the issues that have been raised. But at least there is some level that the protests have placed a demand on the government to act. But again, we need to look at what are the lessons that we have learned. Has the government learned any lessons? Are they willing to take the demand seriously? What are the proposals in place? What are the policies that they are going to develop to address some of the issues that have been raised? I think that's what we should be concerned about.
All right, so
the legal question or the unprofessional way in which
we'll get to that. But we also want to get your opinion. But Barrister has spoken a lot about whether the government response to the protests as protesters' demand is enough. Whether they are just gone back to wait and see what the government will do and finally reinforce and come back if they feel that the government is not doing enough. So that brings us to the question, what do you think? What were the primary factors, that led to this protest in the first place?
Thank you very much. We all know that the protesters came up with a demand. One, that there must be an end to bad governance. And what triggered the protest in the first place is economic hardship. Nigerians were subjected to intolerable hardship, hunger, unemployment, insecurity. And for the first time since independence, there was a protest that was anchored on hunger. They came up with their demands, and first, there were speculations that the government may not allow it, that the law enforcement agencies may disperse the people, and then, like you see in any political structure, some people had to even come up with the memos of years that even the current president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria had participated in protests in 2012 and the other times. And from what we've seen so far, what really triggered up the protest is hardship. And then I commend partly the posture of the government, because it was unlike what we used to see in the past when there had been so much aggression, violence, oppression, intimidations, arrests, and so on. This time around, in as much as we know there are some places where the law enforcement agencies went outside the purview of their duties and started using tear gas and other weapons on peaceful protesters. We also saw a video clips where some of the protesters became violent and were looting. Those things are not allowed. I mean, people came up to do peaceful protests. For others to hijack it and start looting and committing crimes. My take is that those that use of it to commit crimes should be arrested, apprehended, and then made to face the wrath of the law. But coming to the issue on the table, the issue of hunger. The president made an address. He addressed the nation. But then, unfortunately, like most Nigerians have come up to say, his address did not touch on the core demand of the protesters. Not much was said about hunger. Not much was said about insecurity. Not much was said about unemployment and so many things. And the aphorism goes that a hungry man is an angry man. Nigerians are asking that they need to feed. They need at least 3 square meals a day. And we know that the essence of governance is take place for people to come together and elect someone to be their leader is for the welfare of the masses. The welfare of the populace is the supreme law. Now, where people have come up and have leaders, and the leaders appear to be insensitive to their sufferings, it is not a good one. And when somebody from the Senate was alleged to have said that when protesters are protesting out there, they will be busy eating. That's a sad commentary. How can somebody go outside this way to say that others will be protesting on the streets, let them be wasting their time when they are busy eating, instead of finding solution? Because like I said, since independence, as far as I can recall, there have been protests different times in the history of this country, but none that was anchored primarily on hunger. Yeah. And what I expected the government to do, especially the federal government, is to address the issue of hunger. And that can that be done? Still go back to the drawing board. Because things got off guard, triggered, when the president on the day of inauguration said that the first subsidy is gone. That is what triggered off what we are witnessing today. Because from that day, the prices of commodities, transport, everything went high. I expected a response from the government, one, reducing price of fuel. Again, even trying to ensure that the issue of subsidy does no longer arise. How can that be? If our refineries, Nigeria has minimum of 4 refineries, none of them is working. at least for now. If our refineries are working and we don't need to import petroleum products, then the issue of subsidy will no longer rise. Now, if the government will now reduce, or as the government has done in recent time, waiving completely for a while the import duty on food items, bring in more foods to the country, foods will be available to the masses, then the issue of hunger will be addressed.
Yes. There's an oversimplification of the protest to hunger. You think that Nigeria is just talking about, because when we oversimplify it to hunger, it's as if Nigeria asking the government for bread. You know, I'm sure that was why the protest has a broader picture of embarked governance. Because of course, the wakefulness of government is eliminated. There's accountability in the system, and there's a reduction in corruption.
Yes.
You don't need to ask for food.
Yes, you see, what the whole thing culminates into is this: that hunger was triggered by bad administration. And what are those areas? Number one, over time, farmers have not been able to do full-scale farming because of the activities of herdsmen. There are places in Nigeria, in Benue State, in Kogi State, in the eastern part of the country, other parts where farmers before now used to produce a lot of food crops, yam, beans, and what have you. But then, in recent years, herdsmen have been invading farms, killing farmers, destroying their crops, and government has not done enough to stop that. That is one. Now, security generally, the issue of security is something that ordinarily ought to be in the hot burner of the present administration, because where people cannot sleep with both eyes closed is a dangerous dimension. And criminality has even gone to the extent that presently kidnappers are all over the place, kidnapping people here and there, demanding for ransom. So we even after collecting a ransom, go ahead and kill the victim.
So you believe that it's not just hunger that we're talking about here?
So there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things. It's not just hunger per se. But then another thing that the president speech, brought in the forefront, which the learned senior advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana, has also brought to the attention of a lot of people, is the issue of the monies that have been given to the governors in the various states of the federation. That about 11 trillion has been given out by the federal government to the governors. That the high charge now should be, let the governors give account of the money they have collected, and that is an area, the area of corruption, the area of transparency, the area of accountability in governance. You can't just collect monies and then do whatever you like with the money. Government is a trust. You are holding the money in trust for the beneficiaries, who are the Nigerians. Nigerian populace are the beneficiaries of this money. In every state, for example, where a government has been given money to go and develop that state and ensure that there's better economic conditions to cushion the effects of hardship. And those monies are fund diverted or sent abroad one way or the other. It means that in as much as we still ask the federal government some questions concerning the way the economy is being run, the governors will also be held accountable for the monies they have collected.
All right, Master Ebrema. Well, let's get back to this opinion, because, of course, what are the primary responsibilities of government? Because once you run a constitutional democracy, there are basic responsibility every government should perform. And once they pay according to the constitution, for performing some of those basic responsibilities that makes them to be called a government. So what are those basic responsibilities?
Thank you very much. I think my good friend has mentioned almost in the whole spectrum of what is the function of the state and the responsibility
of government according to the law.
Yes, of government to the people. The first, of course, is security of life and property of the people, which is what he had mentioned earlier on. A state that cannot provide security for its people is a failed state. It's a state where non-state actors are more powerful than the government of the state itself, like we are having right now, because a lot of excuses are being given that they cannot handle this. They say they are faceless. Some of these are doctors, kidnappers, and these Fulani headsmen, and all of those kind of people that have been tormenting the country. The government is, like I said, they are not doing enough in arresting this situation. So that's a major problem of security. Then the second problem, which is the function of the state, is to provide basic amenities and infrastructure for the Nigerian people. You find all of these stated in the directive principles and policies under our Section 2 of the Constitution, which is supposed to be the guideline for the government, and the welfare of the people is primary objective of government. And that includes social welfare, the economic welfare, the educational welfare of the people. And the Constitution has stated out what each of these implies for any government, and how they can go about the framework for them to go about achieving these objectives. And I think over the years, most of our governments have not addressed their mind and their policies towards these directive principles of state policy. Well, of course, the provisions of those Section 2 are not justiciable. Maybe their position and maybe it's more justiciable. People who have were government responsible for the failure to provide these infrastructures, these amenities, and all of that. But we find that Nigeria is still a signatory to international conventions and treaties that have allowed this as a justiciable right, the socio-economic rights of the people, which they can actually go to court, to contend. But we have not had this active judicial involvement or advocacy in Nigeria. Maybe that's why our government have not been so active in providing these benefits to the Nigerian people. And of course, you know that where you don't provide education, Nigeria has the largest number of out-of-school children, over 20 million, as most international research have shown. Over 20 million children are on the streets. And government is not doing anything. And the provision of the law says you must provide free, basic, and affordable education to these children, at least up to the secondary school level. And of course, from the university, also the tertiary institution, the education must be affordable. Today, government have completely abdicated their responsibility in the area of education. There is no sponsorship, no.
But people argue that
no scheme cannot provide finance for an average poor student. Let's be realistic. It is not possible to get loan from Nigerian banks today.
Whether it's bought by federal government or not, it's not going to be available to everybody, to every student. It's not going to be available. And there are conditions attached to this loan. Some of those who have finished course or their courses or their program or seeking admission, how much of loans are they able to get to go to university? What is the average fee of most universities in Nigeria today? You know, there are schools that are paying more than 5 million for a course in Nigeria. What kind of job are you going to do to raise a student to pay that fees? Even in public institutions, are they affordable? You know the average fees paid in most of our universities, even public institutions, public universities today, they are just not affordable. So let's be realistic. The government is not addressing, and there's a lot of leakage in our public financing. That's why there's so much corruption in the system. So you believe that the protest was justifiable?
Very justified. Very just. And we have not addressed the problem. And until we address the problem, we will continue to have this pocket of unrest and distress as a nation.
All right, so we have stated that there are some, of course, there are some things that the government is expected to provide. The world to be called the government.
Yes.
The welfare of course, he has said that some of them are not justiciable. They are in the chapter 2 of the Constitution. But what are the justiciable ones? Are there not some justiciable provisions that a government, in order for it to be derived in legitimacy for the provision of certain things that the Constitution has made mandatory, are they supposed to just go there and sit there and they are not
now
not in the Constitution?
Yes.
You see, if you look at it, the Constitution of Nigeria is the primary law, the supreme law, the ground law of this country. And every public officer who takes oath of office, has taken oath to uphold the provisions of that Constitution. What that means is that from the first page, the preamble, to the last page, that everything there is enforceable, and you have taken oath to ensure the enforcement of every provision of that Constitution.
Chapter 2.
Now, coming to chapter 2, there are provisions in the African Charter of Human and People's Rights. Yes, and then the International Covenant on Civil and
Social rights.
yes, that makes provision for these things. And then you discover that in Nigeria, our leaders shy away from the clear provisions. Do you know that in India, the right to food is very much enforceable in their courts, because the right to life is connected with the right to food. And then in other countries, what the government does is, those that are not employed, government pays them welfare package or welfare allowance, because nobody can live without means of sustenance. In Nigeria today, there are a lot of our youths that are into criminality out of frustration. Some are lured into it, this Yahoo and all that. These things are not good omen. They are no good signals for this nation. Because if you think now, in the next 10 years, 20 years, what will happen to Nigeria? Because the youths, the young ones, are the future of this nation. If the majority of our youths don't see education as something that's important, some of them will say that education is a scam, and then they are trying to cut corners. It is not good. Government need to go back to the drawing board. Number one, like my very good brother has mentioned, first, if you want a nation to develop, you educate the people of that nation. And then coming to the issue of education.
We'll go on a short break now.